Let's pick things up there with tonight's political insider. Joining me, Adam Wollner, correspondent for National Journal Hotline. Adam, let's start with Senator Rubio. He got back on message after Saturday's debate. What happens if he weathers the storm and wins New Hampshire? Do Bush, Christie, and Kasich survive?
Well, I think even before his shaky debate performance on Saturday, even the most optimistic Rubio allies weren't expecting him to win the New Hampshire primary on Tuesday. I think they have always viewed him as someone who could come in second place because Donald Trump has been such a formidable frontrunner there. Even after his second place finish in Iowa last week, he still is leading the polls by a considerable margin. And I think that they hope that after his debate performance on Saturday, he's kind of regained his footing a little bit. He's been back on the trail doing some town halls. And really the key for Senator Rubio and some of his allies, or excuse me, some of his rivals that were criticizing him on that debate stage, Chris Christie, John Kasich, Jeb Bush, all these guys who are kind of competing in the so-called establishment lane.
Right.
They just want to finish ahead of each other and try and advance to South Carolina and Nevada, then in a stronger position. And I think that Jeb Bush is the most likely of this group of four who, even if he doesn't have the strongest performance in New Hampshire on Tuesday, he has the resources, he has the organization to advance. Where Chris Christie and John Kasich, really more than anybody, have kind of put all their chips into New Hampshire. And if they aren't able to finish ahead of Senator Rubio and Governor Bush on Tuesday, it's going to be a really tough road ahead for them.
Yeah, diminishing funds. They've got to have the money to keep going. Now, meanwhile, Donald Trump is doing something unconventional, at least for Donald Trump. He's playing down expectations. Tell us more. That's
right. Donald Trump all of a sudden is starting to sound more and more like a conventional politician. Really for the past 7 months, and especially leading up into Iowa, he wasn't downplaying expectations at all. He was predicting a tremendous victory going into the caucuses. He was leading the polls by a couple points leading up to Monday's vote. He ultimately lost, and I think he learned a lesson from that, maybe came away a little bit humbled. And now these last few days we've heard him say, well, I'd like to win New Hampshire, but it's not absolutely necessary. So he's setting himself up. Right now he's so far ahead of the polls that even if he does win, if it's only by a couple points, it would come away not looking so great for him. So I think he's kind of learning how to play this expectations game so that he can kind of have the most momentum possible coming out of New Hampshire.
Now, on the left, Hillary Clinton took a break from New Hampshire for a trip to Flint, Michigan. Why?
So in Flint, of course, I'm sure many of your viewers who have been following the news know that there's been a water crisis going on there. And Hillary Clinton has really been out in front of this issue more so than her opponents, both on the Democratic and Republican side of the aisle. Back in January, there was a debate in South Carolina. It was the first debate kind of after this Flint water crisis hit the headlines. And she went out of her way to talk about it and stress the need to help the residents of Flint. She was there on Sunday, just 2 days before New Hampshire's primary, speaking to a black church there, calling on Congress to provide aid for the city. And this is, key for her. There's obviously some politics involved here. She's performing very strong among black voters. This is going to be a key demographic for her in some states moving forward. And Michigan, their primary is just around the corner as well. It's March 8th, and especially now that it's just a one-on-one battle between Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders, they both need all the delegates they can get, and then they're starting to already eye some of these states that are holding primaries and caucuses in March.
Yep, good point there. Bernie Sanders took a break from New Hampshire as well. He joined his impersonator-in-chief Larry David on Saturday Night Live. How are people grading his performance?
Well, I think more than anything, we finally found out that Larry David and Bernie Sanders are actually not the same person.
That's right. There they are, two different people.
And, I think voters always appreciate when these politicians come onto a show like Saturday Night Live. They always, a lot of times they see them on the stump, they see them on TV, and they come across as very scripted. Bernie Sanders in particular has a reputation for being somewhat grouchy at times. So I think it was good for him to kind of shed that image, show that he has another side. He could humanize himself, show his humorous side. We've seen Hillary Clinton on SNL. Donald Trump even hosted it. And I think it can only help them to come on and crack a few jokes and make light of themselves.
And it's the demographic they're all fighting over, too.
That's right.
All right, Adam, before you go, give us some insight into what's next for the primary campaign. New Hampshire is important, but it's a small piece of the electoral pie. Tell me more about the next big test ahead.
Right, so there's 2 more states to vote this month. We've got Nevada and South Carolina. And these are going to be key states on the Democratic side for Hillary Clinton especially. Iowa and New Hampshire are overwhelmingly white states, and which is why Bernie Sanders is doing so well there. But once we get into Nevada and South Carolina, there's a lot more non-white voters. We have Hispanic voters in Nevada and black voters in South Carolina particularly. So if Secretary Clinton loses New Hampshire on Tuesday, as she's expected to do, she can make up some ground there. And on the Republican side, these are 2 states where guys like Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio really invested early, and they hope that if they have a strong performance in New Hampshire, they can really start to build momentum in these 2 states and hopefully catch up to the likes of Donald Trump and Ted Cruz.
Adam Wollner, correspondent for National Journal's Hotline. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks for having me.